Good morning, everyone. We're so happy to have you all here today. I see some friendly faces that I'm very familiar with. We have a wonderful guest too here with us. Um, we are so happy to have JeanneLauree talking today. It's a privilege and an honor to hear from her. She is such a remarkable friend, speaker, incredible depth and knowledge. Um, This is the HHAU bereavement meeting, and myself, Margine, she just wandered off for just a moment, and Livette, we're part of the chair, and we're so happy to have you all here today. I'm going to turn the time over to Laree, and thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you for that nice introduction and those kind words. Um, there are advantages to just living long enough. that that just the experience of being alive on the planet gives me a certain cachet, and I take full advantage of it. I'm so glad to speak about this topic. Just a quick background. I'm a hospice chaplain, and I have been for 20 years. In a previous life, for 15 years, I was a corporate trainer, and I spoke to this issue a lot. There's been more information that's come out about manipulation specifically. The word itself has a lot of negative semantic loading, but I think of it when I go to the chiropractor and he manipulates my back so that it puts everything back in alignment and it's working better. And maybe not everyone feels the same way as I do about chiropractic, but that's one form of manipulation. When I was teaching this particular topic to corporate America, that's not how it was approached. In a previous life to that, I was a therapist. I worked for 7.5 years with a clinical psychologist, Vern Wolf, as his co-therapist, and we talked a lot about how to manage those kinds of relationships where there were power struggles or there was a power inequity. And so, as I talk about manipulation today, I would like you to have both of those definitions in your mind, that it's how you manage or move the communication in your conversations in such a way that it realigns it and makes it work better and makes the communication flow better. I'd like you also to be aware that in the world of business and in the world of power inequity, manipulation is often a way that is used to dominate or avoid domination. And so I'm going to start out with that kind of in mind and break the ice by talking about ourselves as manipulators. In that power and equity, we almost always find ourselves using the tools we have or the tools we've been exposed to cope with power inequity. And the ideal is that when we look at transactional analysis, it's the parent, adult, child, and adult to adult is the ideal communication pattern because it's the win-win. And in power inequity, you've got parent child, winner loser, dominant, submissive, and those are not as vital and vibrant relationships and have limited ability to create when there's that dominating factor. And so our goal today is for us to be able to move ourselves and our own perspective into a real love affair with the win-win outcome for our negotiations, our conversations, and even just our relationships, that we're inviting people to come into our space in a space of mutual admiration and mutual appreciation, and also valuing their contributions. Stephen Covey was brilliant at talking about that. He said, unity is not uniformity. Oneness is not sameness. Synergy emerges by valuing the differences, by finding the differences and the values in each other and bringing those to bear in a creative environment. More is produced. And we know synergy is not 2 plus 2 equals 4, it's 2 plus 2 equals 9 or more. That one person lifting a piano is really in trouble. 9 people lifting a piano, is still going to struggle, but a community can make magic happen. And so that's the goal today. Let's start by talking about when we're manipulators. The reality is that when there's a power inequity, sometimes it's just perceived. I know that I have a sense of being less than around some people in some situations, and so then I struggle to puff myself up and be more than, or I know I'll say to someone, I know how this conversation's going to go. I know how so and so is going to say what they're going to say, and then I'm strategizing to try and formulate a conversation that will give me equity or even a leg up in the conversation. My hope is that at the end of our time together, which is so brief for such a deep topic, the Harvard Negotiation Project did a deep dive on this about 15 or 20 years ago, and they validated the idea that the bottom line, meaning profitability, is enhanced when everyone involved has that win-win mentality. And so the first thing that I would like for us to look at is how it is that you find yourselves manipulating. And I'm going to share the screen for just a minute and get us kind of into this. So you can see all my bad habits now with what my screen is up to. Here we go. So manipulation is a tactic, and any tactic once revealed can no longer work effectively. It really is the old scripture, the truth will set you free. And once you're aware of what you're doing, or once you're aware of what the other person's doing, you are able to unconceal that and make bigger, better choices. Sometimes these automatic choices really get rewarded. We have high functioning anxiety, and I'm not going to read all of this because I just want you to be aware that we have a thought process that actually has us think that we're being helpful, and we think something will go wrong if I don't do everything myself. And so we have this cognitive uh, coping mechanism that's not necessarily effective, but one that we're very comfortable and familiar with, and so we fall back on that, or it's a thrown way of being. Imagine we've got a holiday coming up, so imagine some of you maybe going home. I'm 72 years old, and I still go into my child mode when I go to a family reunion, or I mean, my family even calls me my mother's JeanneLauree, and I knew I was in trouble. And I love my name and my documents and my visuals. I'll have my whole name on it, but it's usually just my family that calls me by that name, and it throws me back to when I was about 13. And many of you have that same kind of familiarity with how easily that is, um, is an occurrence in our lives. And so I want you to think about stimulus response and how the beauty of being able to see what we're doing is that when that stimulus occurs, you don't have to respond immediately. That's the first thing I want you to kind of put a pin in, benchmark that for, or flag it for your own mind. I don't have to respond immediately. Buy yourself some time and learn little phrases that will allow you to buy yourself some time. Like, I hadn't thought about that. Oh, let me consider that. Even our favorite, I'll take that under advisement. Anything that will allow you to, and just to say, let me think about that for a minute, or give me some time, or you can even just stop and be silent. And in the scheme of how you take control of a situation, we're moving from the strategizing that happens between your ears, which can be improved by your level of self-awareness, to the realization that most of our conversations take place in a dialogue, not a monologue. We can strategize as much as we want to by ourselves, create scripts by ourselves. But a famous general said, no battle plan survives contact with the enemy. And that's certainly been true, even though my contact with patients and business associates and friends are not considered enemies. I know that I can strategize and write scripts in my brain until I'm fried, and nothing ever survives the moment I enter into dialogue with another human being and I'm able to respond. It's a secret that athletes know. Martina Navratilova may not be familiar to some of you younger athletes, but she was a famous tennis player when I was younger. And she was asked what the secret to her success was. She was a powerhouse. She was the Serena Williams of my generation. And she says, I don't worry about the game I'm playing. I've learned to hit whatever comes across the net. And so while she was an extraordinary athlete and a very powerful player, the secret to her success was that she not only prepared herself, which is what we're doing today, but she also was prepared for whatever came across the net. She was nimble and she was able to respond. So it was stimulus, response to create a positive and powerful championship outcome. So the first thing to look at is take a quick dive sometime into when you find yourselves feeling like you want to manipulate. Do a little exploration on your own about those individuals who are intimidating to you, or a quick way to assess it is, who in my life do I find myself wanting to write a script for? And when I find myself going, oh, I know I'm going to see so and so, I know I'm going to meet with so and so, and then I start writing the script, and it's time out, prepare as well as I can, and then be ready for whatever comes across the net. And that's what the rest of this conversation is going to be about. Let me just recircle for just a moment as we move into this next section. The first and most important part of your preparation is for you to be aware of when and how you manipulate, when and how you feel like you're being manipulated. If there are specific people or situations, those become areas in which you want to pay more attention and use some of the skills we're going to use today. I'm going to talk about some of my favorites and give you some real life examples of how this works. So I'll tell one on myself. Please be generous in your listening with me about this. In September, a year ago at this time, I was getting ready to do a TEDx Salt Lake City talk on death and dying that was dear to my heart. I had been coached beautifully by the TEDx Salt Lake City team, and I had been given the privilege of being the final speaker of the day. And Steven Nelson from the Piano Guys, who is an incredible talent and has a marvelous following, was speaking before me. And it was a perfect, it was kind of, it was Stockton. Well, it was Malone to Stockton is what, what it was, because he's such a virtuoso. And so he played and talked about music and his connection to his mother and how it affected him when she passed away. And then I talked about the beauty and the gifts of death and dying and how to prepare for those. And walked away from that experience feeling so enriched, and knowing that they were on YouTube, and knowing that Big Ted, has their eye on people. So this last week, Steven Nelson's amazing talk was picked up by Big Ted, the international organization, and I found myself jealous that his success had been honored and recognized, and I felt disappointed. And anytime I feel powerless like that, I recognize that that's the energy of I don't get mad, I get even, or I don't get mad, I'm gonna think of something to say to someone when they've put me down. I'm gonna think of that comeback that will make them feel small. And that's not a part of me that I'm very fond of or very proud of. But it's a very important part of me to be aware of, because I can at that moment stimulus response take the time out and recognize that that's just my frail humanity, that I am experiencing old old energy, old patterns, and move beyond it. My motto is I don't get mad, I don't get even, I get ahead. And that in the world of win-win, it's not necessary to win at someone else's expense. It's not necessary for me to think of a comeback that will put someone else down. It's not necessary for me to feel less than when someone else succeeds. That I honor myself and truly the holiness in others, the namaste greeting to each other, when I am lifting each other, lifting others, and blessing my life by the blessing of others. So with that in mind, we're going to look at how do you manage, what are some of the patterns that others use to win and make you lose, and how to deal with those particular patterns. I'm going to start by giving you a phrase that I really like, that certainly opens up the door to being able to, no matter what the manipulation tool is, that opens up the door for a different kind of conversation, a shift in the power struggle. And that phrase is, I can see how that's a big win for you, but I don't see how that's a big win for me. So when I was approached by a company to drive to Price and take on 10 additional clients at no additional remuneration, I was able to say, wow, I can see how that's a big win for the company, but I don't see how that's a big win for me. Is there a way for us to create some fairness, create some equity? It doesn't always work, but oftentimes it opens the door for the ability to be able to go a different direction where we're both solving the problem. Let's start with a favorite. Gaslighting is a favorite manipulation technique. It's a tactic where a person, in order to gain more power, makes a victim question their own reality or sanity. When I was doing therapy, I would see this a lot in addictive patterns, in abusive relationships. It's the wife who says to her husband, I don't know what you're talking about. I would never cheat on you. I don't know what. Oh, no, I don't. You must be imagining things. The credit card couldn't have said that. Oh, well, that was just, oh, you're imagining. And the favorite phrase is you're imagining things. Someone trying to gaslight you may tell blatant lies about you to others. And one of the hardest things to do when you're dealing with someone who's gaslighting is to not spend a lot of time defending yourself. While in business settings, it may be important to document the hours you're working, the jobs that you're doing, the activities or tasks you're completing. If you're working with a coworker who is gaslighting you by talking behind your back, oftentimes that documentation serves you well, but don't spend a lot of time defending yourself. They will deny that they ever said or did something, even though you have proof. I was teaching a seminar in Illinois, and that's a big school system state. And this vice principal came up to me and he said, "How do I get my principal to stop lying?" And I said that the answer is not how do you stop someone from doing something, because this is another important aspect. None of what I'm going to teach you today or share with you today will allow you to change someone. It only allows you to see what's happening and then begin to adapt your own behavior. So I said to him, and this was a private conversation at the front of the room, I said, sadly, there's no way for me to give you any kind of effective advice about how to stop someone from being a liar, whether it's a teenager, whether it's a spouse who's cheating, whether it's a principal who just doesn't enjoy the truth. What you can do is be aware that you are dealing with someone who plays fast and loose with the truth, and then make adaptive, positive steps that will protect yourself and further the vision of the school system. They make you question your own reality. It's like, I know that my child is using illegal drugs, and they keep telling me they're not. I must be going crazy. They use what is near and dear to you as ammunition. Manipulators. I want to just do a sidebar really quick. In the world of win-lose, those of us who love a win-win outcome often forget that there are people who love to win by making other people lose. They would rather fight than win, and they only feel like they've won when they've burned down the village. And so when you're dealing with those dangerous individuals, it's harmful for you to expect that they will treat you well if you treat them well. And so you have to play Martina Navratilova's game, a defensive game. And knowing this allows you to do so in a constructive, non-manipulative way. Those individuals who will win by hurting you actually identify your soft underbelly and use that to their advantage by hurting you. They wear you down over time. If you've ever argued with a 3-year-old over a cookie, you know that those little people are relentlessly persistent. They throw in positive reinforcement to confuse you. One of my favorite topics to talk about, and it's a whole different subject, is the abuse cycle. And that in the abuse cycle, that what makes it so dangerous is intermittent positive reinforcement. And so even you may not be working or living or loving someone who is abusing you, you may, however, work with someone, live with someone, or love someone who uses intermittent positive reinforcement. It's like the young woman who says, "Oh, I stay with him. I know I shouldn't stay with him, but I stay with him because the good times are so good." Or I stayed with a hospice company for 5 more years when I should have moved on, because I loved the team. I loved my patients. And those are choices we get to make. It wasn't destructive in my case, but in the case of a marriage, it sometimes can be. They use confusion to weaken you. You will know deeply in your mind that you actually paid that bill, made that phone call, or said that statement, and they will challenge that and are so believable you begin to question yourself. They project their own shortcomings or misdeeds onto you. The wife who's cheating accuses her husband of cheating. The child who's using drugs accuses family members of using drugs. Or their favorite is, well, don't tell me you didn't smoke pot when you were a teenager. Fortunately, I grew up in a small town and missed all of those bad behaviors, so I had a perfect alibi for that one. Project their own shortcomings or misdeeds onto you is a tough one. But if you say, we're not talking about me, we're discussing the issue, we're discussing the project, we're discussing, and my very most favorite phrase for turning this back away from a personalization is, are we going to gang up on the person who caused the problem or team up to solve the problem? And as soon as we move from attacking individuals to attacking the problem, oftentimes the energy shifts powerfully. They try to align people against you, and this is a very powerful game. that is difficult, because then you get into my friends are bigger than your friends, and it's a waste of time. Tell you that others tell others that you are crazy, and tell you everyone else is a liar. So how do you cope? First of all, identifying that. And I want you to think about those times when you have felt like that someone's been gaslighting you. Can you think, just take a moment? I know that participation is a challenge in this setting, but at any point in time, if you want to jump in or you want to make a comment, there's a place where you can raise your hand, and I'll see that in in our view of our audience. Here's where I want you to set here the very first comment I made, which was, any tactic, once it's revealed, is no longer effective. Gaslighting only works when a victim isn't aware of what's going on. Once you become alert to the pattern, it will be easier to combat. Just being able to say to yourself, because as soon as you start to attack and accuse the other person, the walls go up, and all effective communication begins to spiral out of control. And so as you take charge of your own awareness, you can let me just do another little quick PS. The word gaslighting came from an old movie that was about a husband who was literally turning the gas lighting in their old-fashioned home, that was very modern at that time, gas on and off, and denied that he was doing it. Drove her crazy, and it was a very fun and suspenseful movie. But the title of the movie, as often happens in our English language, became a label for a behavior that is so pervasive, most of us can recognize it and find that it is it's infected. It's infected our lives. It's highly unlikely that any of you would be gaslighting each other or another person. It's such a sophisticated defense mechanism used by those who want to cover their trails that it's not likely you would do it, but it's likely that it would be done to you. Once that starts, you recognize it, then you start looking for what's below it. Almost always it's fear, frustration, and a need to dominate. And then you look at, do I need to remove myself, or is there a way to negotiate? And you negotiate by saying, I want for us both to win. This is a marriage that means a lot to both of us. Just with my own child, I say, I love you so much that I want everything between us to be constructive and supportive. And at one point in time, this wasn't a gaslighting, but I actually said to my child, and you can use this with gaslighting by talking about this is what's happening. But I said to my teenage daughter, I'd yelled at her, I said, I don't like the way this happened. Let's go back and do this over again. I'm going to be the child and you can be the mother. And she said, oh, good. Do I get to yell at you this time? And I said, no, you're going to be a good mom and I'm going to be a good child, and we're going to redo this conversation. Never underestimate the power of being able to rewind the videotape as a way of being able to take back your power, take back your control. Believe me, it sounds like an oversimplification that just knowing that someone is gaslighting you is enough to diffuse and almost entirely disrupt the dominance of that strategy to harm you. It's amazing. When I first read that in that Harvard negotiation project paper, that any tactic perceived is no longer a tactic, I was thrilled, because that awareness in that moment is the most powerful tool that you have, the most powerful shift that will take place. It seems so simple because we go, oh, just knowing about it, then what do I do about it? Nothing. Once you have that awareness and you know what's going on, you have a power that rises up within you that is remarkable in its effectiveness as you start to choose other options. Okay, so let's look at this next one. This next one is also, we move from gaslighting to love bombing. Oh, I'm such a fool for this one. Love bombing is a manipulation tactic that happens when someone overwhelms you with affection, adoration, gifts, and love in order to gain control of your behaviors. And again, I'm going to tell one on myself. I have done that. I've done that. And until I recognize, oh no, this is, once I recognize this is something that is an old familiar pattern, often we do that which we've learned, or we do that which has been effective. And so love bombing happened to be one of my favorites. But I was also enthralled by the Romeo who would shower me with attention, shower me with affection, and I was not able to see the artificial or the lack of foundation underneath that particular strategy. Someone trying to love bomb you may lavish you with gifts. This often includes over the top gestures. Now, I certainly don't think that flowers or jewelry or even trips are over the top, but that's just me. Um, I think it's the number of, the expense of, and so I'm not advocating that we stop remembering people's birthdays. I'm not advocating that we stop um, giving flowers and doing kind deeds. I'm saying that when they have an energy of manipulation behind it. I know you can feel that. There's something in the, just on the back, the hair on the back of your neck, and you just go, there's just not a foundation behind this. There's strings attached. There's a hidden agenda. We know that even if in our desire to connect, we ignore it. I'm telling you, don't ignore your best instincts. They give you constant praise and adoration, temporarily. Phrases such as, you're the only person I want to spend time with. I love everything about you, and I've never met anyone I like as much as you. They're wonderful, but it's important to consider the context. Also, I'm very wary of someone who begins to program me. This is love bombing, but love bombing, but 2.3, that they begin to control my behavior and my language with them by saying things like, oh, I love you so much because you don't check my bank balance the way my ex-wife did. Oh, I just love being with you because you never complain that I don't shower like my ex-wife did. Those are exaggerations, but you'll hear forms of those showing up as they begin to tell you what's acceptable behavior, acceptable communication, and it's a dominating conversation. They want to be in constant communication with you. The enmeshment is based on jealousy and domination. Love bombing can take the form of um, constant communication, texting, calling, messaging, showing up at all of hours of the day and night. Now we've got social media, so they can stalk you on social media. And they get upset when you implement boundaries. Remember that boundaries only upset people for whom you need to have boundaries. Keep, like embroider that on a pillow. Boundaries only upset people for whom those boundaries are necessary. That's your cue. People who are not people who don't need boundaries aren't upset by boundaries. They respect and understand them and have them of their own. Often you try to tell um, a love bomber to slow down or implement any kind of boundary with them, and they get upset. And they can present it can this can present itself as declaring that you don't care about them and you don't love them. Though that you don't love me is one of my favorite phrases when someone is trying to get the upper hand. My teenage daughter said that to me once, and I said, "Oh." I said, there's no way you can ever win that argument. You were born 2 weeks early, and from that moment on, you always were in extra credit. I will always love you no matter what. And so that argument just doesn't hold any water. Let's move on because time is at a premium, and really we're going to go through these, and you have all of this. I don't want to just read these to you. I want to share some ideas with you and how I've coped with them, because you've got these slides now. You can go back, and I'm confident Elizabeth sent those slides out to you. If she didn't, we will. So you've got these slides, you can go over them, and we're coming to a part where we will talk in general about how to deal with them. But I love the guilt trip. I wanted to share with you, someone who's guilt tripping you will show up in our close relationships. And it's a way of trying to get you to do what they want to do. And so I'm going to just leave the slide for a moment and share with you a personal experience about how this worked. And and let you know that the person that I'm talking about was my good friend Susie, and she's passed on, but she gave me permission. We used to train together. She gave me permission to share this. So so she and I shared um, children, and so what had happened was that she and her husband came to my children and said, we're going on vacation. The car that we've got's not working well. They said to my children, ask your mom if we can take her car because it's newer. So they came to me and they said, Mom, um, Dad and Susie want to use your car for vacation. Now, of course, putting children in charge of that kind of a third party conversation is really dangerous. And I got my hackles up and I said, no, I'm not going to do that. And so they went back and said, Mom says no. And Susie called me. And Susie said, Lauree, I am so astonished that you would tell your children no about using your car, because I know you're such a good mom. Do you hear where this is going? You're such a good mom. You would never want your children to go on vacation in a dangerous car. And so we're going to, I'm asking you if you'll let us take your car. And I don't ever teach anything that I'm not using. And I said to you, wow, Susie, I can see how this is a big win for you, but I don't see how this is a big win for me. Oh no, I wasn't quite that sweet. But for the first thing I said was, wow, Susie, I've never been guilt loaded so well in my life. I almost fell for it. It was so smooth. And we both, she backed off, and she laughed a little bit and was chagrined. And then I said, I can see how that's a big win for you, but I don't see how that's a big win for me. So notice what I did. I was aware of what was going on. I called the spade a spade directly, probably more directly than I would if it were a business setting. And then I said, it's a big win for you, but not for me. I said, okay, so two people, then this is another favorite. Two people who are as smart as we are should be able to solve this problem. Here's what's going on with me that weekend. I fly in, this when I was traveling for my job. I fly in on Friday and I need a car to be able to take clothes to the dry cleaners and pick up my clean clothes and get groceries. If I give up my car, I'm stuck without those tasks completed. Well, you can see where this is going. That gave Susie the opening to be able to say, let's trade cars. And when it was her idea, I didn't say, I'll give you my car if you'll give me yours. it hadn't really occurred to me. I'm not that smart, but Susie was. And she says, let's trade cars. I also had my daughters do some errands for me. And that's another way when I recognize what someone else wants and they're trying to use that manipulation to get what they want at my expense. I can do a trade-off so that it becomes a win-win, and we don't have that same kind of resentment that occurs when people are um, not sharing them, not sharing the responsibilities equally and the power equally. Calling out guilt tripping when you notice it is one of the most effective ways of combating it. Again, you name it, you claim it, and it starts to lose its power. The next one is negging. Negging is when a person tries to manipulate you into feeling bad about yourself. It happens in a few different ways. People win by making you feel bad about yourself. Well, don't you just look fabulous? I would never be brave enough to wear my hair like that with your face shape. That's the old joke about you don't sweat much for a fat girl as the backhanded compliment. They compare you to other people. Your sister's in such good shape, you should take a cue from her. They're always just joking. And, where's your sense of humor? Lighten up. Just a joke. They insult you under the guise of constructive criticism. As a, how do I say that? As someone who finds that my history in management was most powerfully impacted by this particular concept, I want you to just stop, take a breath, and hear this little piece. There is no such thing as constructive criticism. There's critical information, but the difference between constructive criticism and critical information, Gottman talks about it when he describes contempt in a conversation as a conversation breaker, deal breaker. I'm going to come back to that in just a minute. I want to finish this slide. They disguise insults as questions. Don't take this the wrong way. I'm only telling you this for your own good. And they make you feel sorry for voicing any concerns or minimizing any of their. When you call them out about that, they're great at denying. Oh, you're imagining things, a little gaslighting. Oh, can't you take a joke? Then that's that negging. I worked for a boss. When you get to be my age, I could talk about my boss and no one would ever know which boss it was. I've had enough of those. So this boss will remain anonymous and bears no, that disclaimer in the front of movies. This bears no resemblance to any human living or dead. So I had a boss once upon a time, and I recognized the difference immediately. There was a day when I walked out of the office and my boss said to me, "Did you notice that you've got a headlight out?" And I was so grateful to know that was called to my attention before I was pulled over and ticketed. That energy, sometimes you just have to trust your gut. That energy was so evident of concern. It was positive and it was constructive. On the other hand, that was maybe a couple of weeks later, he said to me, "Who did you see 2 days ago? What was your schedule like 2 days ago?" And once I've seen patients, charted them, I'm on to the future. 2 days in my past, once that charting is done, I could not. I would have to, and I said I would have to get out my calendar and look to see who I saw. He said anyone who was honest wouldn't have to look at their schedule. And I was heartbroken. And I said, "Wow, I'm astonished." He says, "I'm just giving you some constructive criticism." And it was like, wow, that was ouch. Sometimes when I get that kind of negging, I will just say, ouch. that really hurt. And people often don't take accountability for that really hurt. One time, however, I did get a little cranky. It was that story I started to tell you about being asked to go to Price and take on 10 new patients. And I said, I can see how this is a benefit to you and not to me. Is there any way to negotiate for some fairness with mileage or increased revenue to compensate for that? And the person I was working with was a manager for that large hospice company. And she said, no, I know you have 40 patients, but it's typical for a chaplain to see 40 or 50 patients a month. That's typical. And I said, certainly in an institutional setting like primary children's hospital, or where they see everyone in a single setting. I travel all over Salt Lake, and it would require me to drive 100 miles one way to go to Price. And I said that it just feels a little bit inequitable for me. And she says, well, I think it's fair. Chaplains like you are a dime a dozen. And I said, wow, that's great to know. I said, Michelle McDonald over at Haven's been recruiting me a little aggressively the last couple of months. And so it makes it easy for me to make that decision if chaplains like me are a dime a dozen. So there are times when being able to maintain our cool, not lose our temper, don't get mad, don't get even, get ahead. Those are the keys to getting past those kinds of manipulative techniques. I made this slide bigger so that you could see and read it, so that you could see what those phrases were that are useful to know. Emotional blackmail. Emotional blackmail is extremely complicated. First of all, the thing that happens with emotional blackmail is it's a dysfunctional form of manipulation, which I think is an oxymoron. This whole conversation with you that I've had from the beginning is manipulation is not an effective tool. There are ways we can actually, construct a conversation constructively, but when they say that emotional blackmail is a dysfunctional form of it, I think all they're saying is pay attention. It's even worse than what we've already talked about. It's a place where people use demands, and they threaten the victim or threaten us to get what they want. The undertone of emotional blackmail is, if you don't do what I want when I want it, you will suffer. And it's high on the list. So the Harvard Negotiation Project came out with a list of tactics that escalate from asking you nicely to being demanding and even threatening and violent. And so they recognize that hierarchy, and emotional blackmail is high on that list of escalations. People who resort to emotional blackmail are really desperate at being able to force you into giving them what they want. If you ever stop loving me, I'll kill myself. I've already discussed this with our pastor, therapist, friends, boss, and they agree that you are being unreasonable. I'm taking this vacation with or without you. It's that line drawn in the sand, that ultimatum over which there is no way to resolve the situation. I want to keep moving through these slides so that you can see. There's that slide that's easier to read, so that you can see what we're talking about as we get into now the mental impact of manipulation. Okay, so we've talked about a handful of very common ways of manipulating. Now we start to do our summary. We start to actually come through towards the conclusion of our time together, which sadly I love being with you, and so and I love sharing these ideas and these topics. So drawing to the conclusion is not always the happiest time for me, but it's a very important part of our conversation, because you can never create effective outcomes by just creating problem identification. You also have to create solution design. So gear up. We're going to do solution design now. First of all, the impact of manipulation. Someone who is a victim of manipulation, you'll know, you may not, these people around you may be so subtle in their manipulation. 3-year-olds are wonderfully subtle about it. But when you're in the target of someone who's manipulating, you know it because you feel depressed, you develop anxiety, you start making some of those excuses that were in that very first set of slides about high anxiety. You develop unhealthy coping patterns. I actually had a client who was in an abusive relationship. This happened to be a husband-wife relationship. The husband was the abuser, the wife was abused, and she actually said to me, I know how to trigger my husband's abuse. I have been with him so long, I know now when he's going to abuse me, when the tension starts to build, and I will trigger his abuse event on Thursday because I'm going to go get my hair done on Friday and I want to get it out of the way. I was astonished that that was the coping mechanism that she felt was useful for her. Constantly try to please or manipulate the manipulating person, especially with love bombing. We just anticipate, how can I please them? How can I keep the gifts coming? They lie about their feelings. I would dismiss my own feelings. I would say, I'm not, this doesn't make me feel attacked. This doesn't make me feel off balance. And so when I was honest with you about being jealous of Steven Nelson, to be honest with my feelings may not always sound attractive, but lying about my feelings and pretending, oh, that just didn't bother me at all, it doesn't give me any freedom to actually get to the point where I can see the beauty of Steven's gift in his TED Talk and recommend it highly to you all. Put another person's needs before their own. I'll bet if I ask for a show of hands, the caregivers, especially, that's our business. We put our needs above our own. When I was doing the Road Less Traveled seminars for Scott Peck, who wrote the book, The Road Less Traveled, we talked about being able to compartmentalize. He calls it bracketing. And he describes it as a powerful skill that allows those of us who are professionals to set our feelings aside while we are in a therapeutic setting. It allows us not to project onto our patients or our clients. Bracketing is good, but it is not good to put another person's needs before our own when we can have a win-win if we simply stay aware and available to the creative process. Find it difficult to trust others. The manipulation makes us think of everyone as manipulators, and in some cases, manipulation can be so pervasive that it causes a victim to question their perception of reality. Now you see why we talked about gaslighting specifically. How to deal with manipulative people. Okay, this is what we do now with all of those labeled behaviors. This is the secret sauce that works with all of them. When I talked about stimulus response, that's the timeout. Stimulus, you feel the manipulation, you recognize it, or you're in the midst of it and you need to go back, but you stop, you take that time out, and you disengage. I knew a high-powered, very successful attorney in Chicago who negotiated multi-million-dollar deals, and he said that his favorite disengagement tactic was a bio break, which just is a very, very suave way of saying he took a bathroom break and interrupted the flow of the manipulation so that he could gather his thoughts, and I highly recommend it. If someone is trying to get a particular emotional response from you, choose not to give it to them. At least not reacting. Stimulus response instead of stimulus react. If you just stop, a manipulative friend is known to flatter you before asking for a favor. Don't play along. Rather, reply politely and shift the conversation. As you just look at how you can disengage, Just the disengagement, removing yourself temporarily from that, just by saying, let me think about it. When Susie called and asked for me to let her use my car, if I hadn't had time to think about it after my children asked, I could say to her, give me a minute. Let me look at my schedule. Let me check my agenda. Let me see what's happening that weekend. Disengage, even for the slightest moment, breaks that chain of reaction so that a more positive outcome is available. Be confident. I know you have the most compassion for me when that boss said to me, what patients did you see 2 days ago? It shook my confidence. And then when he said anyone who was honest would know who they were treating 2 days ago. What's the matter with you? It was hard for me to be confident in the face of that. And I acknowledged that it was a tough one. And I I disengaged, but I didn't handle it well. On the other hand, when I was told that chaplains like me are a dime a dozen, I had enough confidence under my belt about the work I do, the love I bring to my patients and their families, that was unshakable. You cannot mess with me about that part of my life and my work. Address the situation. Now call out the manipulative behavior as it's happening if you can, or go back and do so afterwards. Keeping the focus on how the other person's behavior is affecting you rather than starting with an accusatory statement. It is truly the moment when we use reflective listening. Susie, if I hear you clearly, what you're saying to me is that you would like me to do without a car for a whole weekend so that you and my girls can use my newer, better car. Is that what I'm hearing? And while that has a snarkiness about it, it is an accurate reflection of what it was she was saying. And she says, well, when you say it that way, I said, well, I'm sure two people who are as smart as we are can figure out a solution to this that's a win-win for everybody. Let me see. Also, helping you to using those I statements and describing the problem. Let's talk about the problem, not the personalities. I was dealing with a husband and wife question at the end of a seminar, and I said, "How are you communicating?" And the wife said, "Well, he's always expecting me to be the one who gets the babysitter." And I know that's a simple thing, but it's often the kind of thing that can disrupt a happy husband-wife relationship. And I said, so what's the problem? And she says, he's lazy. No, I said, that's not the problem. I said, the problem is you want to go out on Friday night and the kids need a babysitter. Oftentimes, when you distill the problem to its most basic elements, the need for a power struggle goes away. As soon as I said to Susie, here's what it sounds like to me. I need a car. You need a safe car. How do we both get what we want? You will be extremely valuable and powerful when you develop the ability to blow away the fluff and see and explain what the actual problem is. Let's go now to this next slide. You're not alone. Here are a few ways that you can help yourself. Trust your gut. I've said that over and over again. Trust your instincts. If you feel like you're being manipulated, try to treat that, trust that feeling. Reach out to a professional. Don't for a minute hesitate to get a tune-up. I have clients who come back to me year after year just for a tune-up. Text hello to 741-741. That is an abuse line and a helpline, and the following slides help you. I'm just going to go through this. Confide in someone you trust. Find a third party, someone who's an objective observer. Be careful. This is my caveat. Be careful, because I've been known in the past to ask my friends to support my bad behavior rather than asking someone who will actually tell me the truth, for feedback about what my part in that particular dance looks like. And so I'm going to just tell you, this is the script and the explanation for texting 741-741. This tells you everything you need to know about 741 in such a way that you can print it out and share it with your clients, your patients, and other people. I want you to know that our nature is to heal. Our nature is to share, to love, to be kind. And as you're healing, you'll find that you're more observant and less judgmental. You're responsive, less reactive. There's more love and more self-love and less self-sabotage. More boundaries, less resentments. Inner peace. Your life becomes boring. Isn't that exciting? I remember when Oprah said she thought that Stedman was boring because she'd been in so many abusive relationships and her relationship with him was healthy. No chaos, more clarity, less confusion, more being, less doing. You're working smarter, not harder. And there's more faith and less fear. This is one of my favorite things to begin to leave you with. When your bones are tired of carrying everyone else's problems, and when your lungs are tired of breathing life into other people, return back home to yourself for a while. Shift your energy back inwards. Reunite with peace again. My friends, I know that you're on this meeting today, on this call today, because you are in the field of caring for others. I acknowledge you for the work you do. I also know sometimes what you need to do is to take a time out, turn off the television, and sit under a tree and just let the world breathe back life into your soul. Never forget that you are water. Cry, cleanse, flow, let go. Your fire, burn, tame, adapt, ignite. Your air, observe, breathe, focus, decide. Remember that you are earth. Ground yourself. Give, build, heal. You're complicated and wonderful and powerful and divine. Nietzsche, who's not been known for his optimism, said, I was in darkness, but I took 3 steps and found myself in paradise. The first step was a good thought, the second a good word, and the third a good deed. And that is my prayer for you. And finally, if all else fails, do pandemic yoga. You'll notice that the charm of this shows up right away as you look at that little meme. I love that you have taken the time to be with me today. I hope that you will find yourself nurturing, stretching, in child's pose when necessary. And I want you to have contact information. I'll put my contact information in an email that Elizabeth can send out. Any questions that I wasn't able to answer today, I see that here we've got 13 wonderful comments and comments. I cherish all of those. Thank you for sending those to me. And so I want to be able to get, let's see real quickly if there's any question I missed. Okay, those slides will come to you. And my contact information will come with those slides. Perfect. Thank you so much for being with me. I love you for taking the time. Have a great weekend, a long weekend. And may you find yourself sometime during this weekend sitting underneath a tree. Thank you. Have a great day and a great weekend. Bye-bye.
Thanks, JeanneLauree. You did a great job. And what a timely topic for us. We were saying how she just used this the other day and with families, and we learned a lot, and we appreciate you so much. We would like to invite everyone to next month. Please feel free to come to Premier Funeral Services in Salt Lake, or join us on Zoom probably. Thanks for everything. We'll see you next month, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Jean.
Bye-bye.